Since 1963, more than 22 African presidents then in power have been assassinated by France. Many of them asserted their independence and refused to go along with the colonial power. Among them is former Libya President Muammar Gaddafi. Most of the coups and assassinations were carried out by the SDECE, the DGSE, and the DST. These are three French intelligence services that have the reputation of carrying out coups and murders in Africa. Since Charles de Gaulle, the French authorities have been denigrating Africans in this way. Count the number of coups that France has plotted and carried out in Africa. It deserves at least a complaint to the International Criminal Court against the French state. French crimes are well known, and documentaries flood French and African television stations documenting how France wantonly murders, imprisons, and loot in Africa. The External Documentation and Anti-Espionage Service SDECE is in charge of France's information campaigns in Africa. The DGSE is the main secret service abroad, which is charged with the controlling and the black skin governance, the term France uses to describe African puppet president under its control. There is another, DST, Direction of Homeland Security, which deals with the interior and exterior security of France. It is charged with protecting France from the dangers of immigration. After the DGSE, the DST, and the SDECE, there is the Directorate of Military Intelligence, the agency responsible for France's military propaganda during conflicts in Africa. From De Gaulle to Sarkozy, De Gaulle sacrificed African independence for the benefit of France for four reasons. The first is the rank of France at the UN with a procession of client states that can vote for France. The second is access to strategic raw materials such as oil, uranium, gold, wood, cocoa. The third is financing of French political life through levies on official development aid or the sale of raw materials. And the fourth reason is the role of France as a subcontractor to the United States, basically leasing its influence in Africa to the US. So, for these four reasons, France has put in place a system that denies its former colonies independence. That is the reason why blood continues to flow on the African continent. In Cameroon, the UPC struggled for independence. Nyobe was crushed between 1957 and 1970 in a bloodbath that left between 100,000 and 400,000 dead. In Togo, more than a quarter century of dictatorship with the complicity of France. Barely 3 years after the independence of the young Togolese Republic, it was the brutal eruption of the army into political life. On January 13, 1963, Sylvanus Olympio, the first democratically elected president, is assassinated by Sergeant Etienne Ayedema at the head of a clique of former soldiers after the Vietnam War. The men carried out a coup with the support of the French officer who was supposedly responsible for the security of Olympio. They assassinated the president on January 13, 1963. Ayedema Etienne spent more than 40 years in power. His reign of terror was reminiscent of Nicolas Ceausescu, and he left a country mired in chaos and poverty. He died in 2005. His son Faure Ayedema replaced him, and this too was possible only with the support of France. In the Central African Republic, there was a promising statesman, Barthélemy Boganda, who died in a mysterious plane crash. Barthélemy Boganda mysteriously died on March 29, 1959 in an aerial disaster while traveling between Babareti and Bangui. Abel Gumba, Foreign Minister, Minister of State and President of the Governing Council, is said to succeed him. David Dacko, the suspected architect of the death of Barthélemy Boganda with the help of French militia in Bangui, dismissed Abel Gumba from succession. Abel Gumba then founded an opposition party, MEDAC, Movement for Democratic Development of Central Africa. The MEDAC will only have a short duration. David Dacko dissolves the party and imprisons its leaders. The Central African Republic of David Dacko, in the grip of serious financial crisis, misappropriation of public funds, instead of reacting and acting quickly, decides to hand over power to the Chief of Staff, Colonel Jean Bedel Bokassa, on 1st January 1966. France installed Bokassa as king and plundered the Central African Republic's resources. Bokassa eventually fell and died in misery. In the Comoros, 2 assassinated heads of state and 2 others deposed. In the Comoros, 2 assassinated heads of state and 2 others deposed by mercenary Bob Denard. In Niger, the same day, Nigerian leader Hamani Diori threatened to sell the country's uranium to other countries for a better price than France was paying. He was disposed by a military coup in which he was brutally murdered. African leaders assassinated because they refused to be puppets of France. In Gabon, Jamian Dion Mba dies of a cancer in Paris at the hospital Claude Bernard on November 26, 1967. Like all properly educated African nationalists, he was against the idea that Gabon should be a puppet state controlled by France. Mba enters active political life as early as 1960 and was immediately labeled as a dangerous agitator by French agents and politicians who were still in charge of the country's security apparatus. Away from Libreville, on an important appointment, he was briefly overthrown by Jean-Hilary Aubame with help from France. On February 19, 1964, under international pressure, French paratroopers restored Léon Mba to the presidency. Mba resigned from his position to express his disapproval. The case caused international outcry and highlighted the pressure campaign against the neo-colonialist attitude of Paris. Germain Mba was rejected by Paris and Libreville. He became a wandering pariah among the Franco-African community. He first fled to Brazzaville, where he was expelled shortly thereafter by a puppet government dependent on the services of Jacques Foucault. He settled in Kinshasa, where he was imprisoned for a month. Rejected from Africa, Germain Mba finally returned to Europe and worked with the newspaper Jeune Afrique, of which he later became deputy editor-in-chief in 1965. On the night of September 18, 1971, Mr. Germain Mba, former ambassador in Bonn, who was also appointed in Tokyo, returned from the cinema accompanied by his wife and daughter. Ms. Mba and her daughter got out of the vehicle and entered the house. As Mr. Mba closed the door, a man came out of the shadows and fired 2 shots, killing him. So you can see those are just some of African leaders who were assassinated by the West, France, because they decided or they rejected being their puppet. So if you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so that you don't miss out on content like this that we always post on daily basis.